You made a choice to hold your energy, to say no to the impulses that used to dominate you, and something inside you began to shift. But this wasn't just a physical change, it was psychological. It touched something much deeper, the unconscious. The energy you once wasted on fleeting pleasure began to gather, to circulate inward, fueling your dreams, your focus, your creative force. People started noticing you. Opportunities appeared. Respect followed. But so did the pressure. Temptation grew louder. Your mind became restless, and you started to ask yourself, why is it that the more I contain this energy, the more reality tries to break me? Carl Jung called it psychic energy, libido redirected toward inner development. When a man chooses to retain, he's not just holding back a physical act, he's transmuting desire into presence, into power, into awareness. And that is threatening. You began to touch the self, the deepest, most authentic part of who you are. And every time we approach that center, the shadow awakens. Not just within you, but around you. The parts of you that want to sabotage your growth. The forces outside you that sense your vibration has changed and try to pull you back into unconsciousness. Retention is a call to individuation, the journey of becoming whole. And every true individuation begins with crisis. You're not being punished. You're being refined. You've become a target not because you're doing something wrong, but because, for the first time, you're doing something real. You're now a quiet threat to a system that thrives on male weakness and disconnection. Your energy carries weight, depth, intention, and that disturbs the norm. Today you'll understand why the man who retains his essence begins to embody ancient archetypes, the warrior, the king, the sage, why his presence shifts a room before he speaks, and why unconscious forces, often disguised as pleasure, validation, or opportunity, try to pull him down. This video is for those who are awakening, for those who have felt the world test them the moment they chose to rise. You're not going crazy. You're becoming differentiated. And now, more than ever, you must understand. Inner growth attracts light, but it also awakens shadow, and every light casts a sharper shadow. When a man begins to hold back his essence, he doesn't just gain strength, he disrupts patterns, both in himself and in others. The unconscious does not tolerate change easily. It resists, tests, and confronts anything that threatens its familiar dynamics. Jung understood this better than anyone. The process of becoming whole isn't a path of comfort. It's a confrontation with all that's been hidden, ignored, or suppressed. Retention is not merely a physical practice. It is a declaration, a refusal to be ruled by compulsion. A statement to the unconscious that the ego is no longer willing to be a puppet of desire. This declaration does not go unanswered. As soon as you stop wasting your energy in trivial pleasures, that energy begins to rise, but it does not rise peacefully. It confronts you with everything you've avoided. Your addictions, your fears, your unresolved emotions, they surface. The mind becomes louder, not because you're failing, but because you're finally listening. In Jungian psychology, this is the moment when the unconscious attempts to restore balance, and it often does so by throwing projections, fantasies, and inner resistance right back at you. The world appears to conspire against your discipline, but in truth, you are facing the architecture of your own psyche, and it is demanding integration. You begin to notice the change in how others react to you. Not always positively. Some people will be drawn to your presence, to the calm gravity you now carry, but others will be disturbed by it. Not because you've wronged them, but because you mirror something they haven't yet found in themselves. Jung spoke of the projected shadow, how people unconsciously place parts of themselves onto others. When you stop being impulsive, you reveal their impulsivity. When you stop chasing validation, you make them confront their own need to be seen. This is why you become a target, not because you attack, but because your presence exposes. There is something deeply unsettling about a man who no longer needs external stimulation to feel alive. In a world addicted to dopamine and distraction, silence is rebellion. Stillness is defiance. Self-possession becomes dangerous, and make no mistake, your self-possession will provoke. The system, whether social, economic, or psychological, depends on you being controllable. It thrives when you are reactive, needy, easily seduced. But when you retain your essence, you reclaim your will. You become less predictable, less dependent, and with that comes the ultimate threat. You become sovereign. This sovereignty cannot be bought. It cannot be faked. It is earned through restraint, through inner confrontation, through conscious suffering. And that suffering isn't punishment. It's purification. In Jungian terms, it is the necessary descent into the shadow, the journey into the underworld of your own psyche. You begin to see your inner landscape more clearly, your traumas, your wounds, your primal instincts. And instead of running from them, you learn to hold them, to observe them without becoming them. This is true retention, not just of physical fluid, but of psychological energy. You stop leaking into drama, fantasy, and emotional chaos. You become a vessel. And as the vessel fills, you begin to radiate. Not with arrogance, but with presence. There is a still intensity in men who retain, a focused awareness, a kind of quiet fire behind the eyes. Women sense it, children sense it, even animals sense it, because it is natural and yet rare. You are no longer overstimulated and underconnected. You are rooted, centered, charged. This charge does not need to shout. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply exists, and that in itself is power. Jung said that power does not corrupt, power reveals. And when a man builds inner power through retention, what is revealed is the truth of his being. But this truth, too, has its price. You will not be met with universal applause. Some will admire your discipline, others will envy it. Some will want to learn from you, others will want to pull you back down. And often they won't even know why, because your elevation confronts their stagnation. Your clarity highlights their confusion. Your refusal to be used as an object, sexually, emotionally, or socially, will challenge those who are still trapped in patterns of use and misuse. You are no longer available in the same way, no longer giving away pieces of yourself for scraps of attention. And in a world of transaction, your self-containment becomes intolerable. But this is exactly where the transformation begins. The man who learns to endure this, to walk through temptation without bending, to be misunderstood without needing to explain, to be alone without feeling lost. This is the man who is becoming whole. He no longer seeks to escape himself. He is no longer at war with his instincts, but neither is he ruled by them. He has integrated them. The warrior within him has discipline. The lover has boundaries. The king has vision. The sage has silence. This is the work Jung pointed to, the work of becoming all that you are, not fragmented, not diluted, but unified. You don't need to advertise this transformation. You don't need to post about it. True power is never loud. It moves subtly. It influences by being, not by speaking, and yet it is felt in the firmness of your handshake, in the steadiness of your gaze, in the way you say no without guilt, in the way you hold yourself, not above others, but within yourself. People won't always be able to name it, but they will feel it. And many will react, some will be drawn, others will push away. That's not your concern. Your work is not to be understood. Your work is to become. And becoming, in Jung's view, is not about perfection. It's about integration. It's about being real, being responsible for your energy, choosing day after day to not abandon yourself for comfort, choosing to face the chaos within rather than chase stimulation outside. choosing to stay present even when the shadow roars. This is not weakness, this is maturity, and this maturity is the rarest form of rebellion in a world that celebrates indulgence and calls it freedom. So if you feel like a target, it's because you are, but not because you're wrong, because you're rare. By the way, if you're ready to harness this power even deeper and protect your energy like a fortress, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that helps you build unshakable inner strength in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. And the rarity of your path will isolate you, not in a way that leaves you lonely, but in a way that separates you from the masses. You'll begin to notice that most people are not operating from consciousness, but from patterns, unconscious repetitions of pain, fear, and distraction. They seek comfort, not clarity. They pursue escape, not elevation. And as you retain your energy, your very presence begins to mirror that difference. You are no longer entangled in the same compulsions, no longer caught in the same noise. You begin to see the world from a higher place, not superior, but more awake. Jung believed that when a man connects with his deeper self, he also confronts the collective unconscious. That means your transformation is not just personal, it's archetypal. You are embodying something ancient, the journey of the hero, the path of the seeker, the fight between light and shadow. This is why your discipline evokes such strong reactions. You are no longer just another man. You have become a symbol. To some, you represent hope. To others, a threat. And whether they're aware of it or not, they will treat you accordingly. This symbolic weight is something you must carry with maturity. The more energy you accumulate, the more the ego wants to feed on it. It starts whispering, "You're better than them, you're special, you deserve more." And if you're not careful, you fall into the trap of spiritual inflation, mistaking growth for superiority. But that's not individuation, that's another ego game. Jung warned that the path toward wholeness was always accompanied by danger. The danger of mistaking the power of the self for personal glory. You must remember, the energy that now flows through you is not yours. It is life itself, channeled through your choice to be conscious. With that consciousness comes responsibility. The retention of your essence is not about power over others. It is about power within yourself, power to remain grounded in chaos, power to stay loyal to your truth when temptation whispers your name, power to speak less and say more. To walk into a room and not need to dominate because your presence already fills the space. This is what makes you a target. Not aggression, but calm. Not arrogance, but silence. Not force, but presence. People will test you. Some will try to pull you into old games, sexual, emotional, competitive. They want to see if the new you is real or just a performance. You will be misunderstood, labeled cold, distant, intense. Let them speak. Let them project. What they cannot understand, they will attack. But remember what Jung said. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Their reactions are not about you. They are reflections of their own inner conflicts, triggered by your transformation. That's why the work must go deeper. Retention isn't the end. It's the door. It opens access to parts of yourself you once feared. The child who was hurt, the teenager who was rejected, the man who used pleasure to escape pain. All of it must be faced, because the energy you're now holding will amplify whatever remains unhealed. If there is shame, it will grow louder. If there is fear, it will become sharper. But this is not punishment. It's purification. You are being prepared for depth, for leadership, for purpose, and that purpose cannot be faked. In a world full of men who speak of greatness but act out of insecurity, the one who moves from stillness becomes unforgettable. He doesn't convince, he transmits. He doesn't seduce, he resonates. He doesn't chase, he attracts. not because he memorized tactics, but because he mastered himself. That's the secret the world doesn't teach. When you stop pursuing everything outside of you, what's meant for you begins to come. But it doesn't come to the man pretending to be strong. It comes to the man who became strong through silence, solitude, and discipline. This is why temptation increases. Not because you're weak, but because your energy has value now. The world will try to consume what you've cultivated. You'll notice old vices calling back. Random encounters appearing with seductive energy. People from your past returning with soft voices and familiar comfort. These are not coincidences. These are tests. And every test has one question hidden beneath it. Are you truly ready for what you asked for? Because you can't rise and remain the same. The version of you who wasted energy cannot coexist with the version of you who builds kingdoms. One must die. The question is, which one will you feed? In Jungian terms, this is the battle between the ego and the self. The ego wants safety, approval, and control. The self wants truth, evolution, and integration. Retention forces that confrontation. It strips away the layers. It demands you choose. Not just once, but every day. Every moment you say no to temporary pleasure, you're saying yes to something greater. Not out of fear, but out of reverence for your own potential. And that reverence becomes magnetic. You'll see it in the way people pause when you speak, the way women look at you without understanding why, the way opportunities unfold, not because you chased them, but because you prepared for them. This is not magic. It's alignment. Jung taught that when a man becomes aligned internally, the external world begins to reflect that order. Synchronicities appear, paths open, people come, but so do challenges. Because the world will always test your center. It wants to know if you're stable or just pretending. That's why you must keep refining, keep observing, keep grounding. Your energy is sacred now. You've turned it inward and it's begun to shine. But that light must not blind you. It must illuminate. You are not above others. You are simply more aware of yourself. And awareness breeds compassion, not weakness, compassion. You'll see others differently. You'll recognize the pain behind their projections, the fear behind their need to provoke, the hunger behind their laughter, and instead of reacting, you'll remain still. Stillness is the final proof of mastery, not because you're hiding, but because you no longer need to prove. You no longer need to be loud to feel powerful. Your power has moved from the surface to the core. And from that core, everything changes. So if the world feels heavier lately, if temptation is louder, if your thoughts are more intense, know this: you are not falling, you are ascending. And the higher you rise, the clearer the view, but also the stronger the wind. Stand firm. You are becoming the man you were always meant to be. You've made it this far, and yet the battle is far from over. Because once your energy starts creating change, the attacks no longer come in obvious ways. They come dressed as comfort, as opportunity, as attention. They don't hit you head on. They whisper, they seduce, they distract. And if you're not vigilant, you won't even see them as attacks. You'll mistake them for rewards. That's the real danger. Carl Jung warned that what we fail to make conscious will rule us from the shadows. And that's exactly how the unconscious works when you begin retaining your essence. The impulses you no longer act on don't disappear. They simply go underground. They take new shapes. You stop chasing physical pleasure, and suddenly you're chasing productivity, recognition, even spiritual validation. You look disciplined on the surface, but the compulsion has just changed its mask. This is why retention without introspection becomes a trap. Energy without direction will find its own outlets, and those outlets might be just as draining as the old ones. You begin working harder, but not smarter. You push yourself toward goals that aren't even aligned with your soul. You think you're rising, but you're just running. And what are you running from? silence, stillness, depth. Because the real war isn't outside, it's internal. You've become magnetic, you've become sharp, you've stepped into the space of transformation. But with that power comes exposure, and everything unhealed within you now begins to surface. Old wounds, hidden insecurities, forgotten memories. They don't rise to punish you, they rise to be integrated. And that's the essence of Jung's work, integration. You cannot grow while rejecting pieces of yourself, even the dark parts, especially the dark parts. This is where many men get stuck. They confuse retention with suppression. They hold back the physical, but bury the emotional. They become hard, rigid, closed, and over time their magnetism fades. Why? Because their energy becomes stale, circling inwards with no outlet, no purpose, no meaning. Retention is not about becoming untouchable, it's about becoming whole. To truly hold power, you must learn how to transmute. Transmutation means converting the raw sexual energy, the same force that drives creation, desire, hunger, into something higher, into vision, into service, into embodiment. It means using that fire not just to warm yourself, but to light the way for others. Jung called this the alchemical process, turning base material into gold, turning instinct into insight, flesh into spirit. But that process is painful. It requires sacrifice. And here's the paradox. The more powerful you become, the more subtle the sacrifices need to be. You'll be tempted to speak about your journey, to post, to preach, to let the world know what you've discovered. But often, that very impulse is the ego's final trick, trying to reclaim control by broadcasting what should remain sacred. True retention teaches you to protect what's valuable, and your energy is your gold. Not everyone deserves to touch it. Not everyone can hold it. This doesn't mean isolation. It means discernment. You begin to notice who drains you, who fuels you, who reflects you, and who simply wants to feed on you. You no longer enter every conversation. You no longer chase every woman. You no longer need to prove your value. Your presence speaks, and the world listens, even if it doesn't understand. That misunderstanding is another test. People will project things onto you. Say you've changed. Say you're arrogant. Say you're detached. They're right, you have changed. You are detached. From the noise, from the drama, from the need to be liked. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not distant. You're focused. And that clarity, that focus, that energetic discipline terrifies those who've never experienced it. Because in a world addicted to stimulation, the man who holds still becomes a mirror. He reflects what others lack, and not everyone wants to see that. Some will attack, some will tempt, some will mock, but their response is not your responsibility. Your task is to continue, not harder, not louder, but deeper. Retention is not a peak you reach, it's a path you walk. Some days you will stumble. You will feel restless, you will doubt everything, and that's okay, because growth isn't linear. Jung reminded us that the psyche heals in spirals, returning to the same wounds with greater awareness each time. The goal is not to never fall. The goal is to fall more consciously and rise with more clarity. With time, you begin to notice something extraordinary. Your thoughts become cleaner. Your gaze becomes sharper. Your body feels lighter, but stronger. You don't just walk, you glide. You don't just listen, you hear. You begin to perceive subtleties you never noticed before. Body language, intention, energy shifts in a room. Your intuition sharpens. You sense danger before it arrives. You sense opportunity before it knocks. Why? Because your energy is no longer scattered, it's concentrated. And with that concentration comes awareness. With awareness comes presence. And with presence comes power. But not power as the world defines it. Not domination, not control, true power. The kind that doesn't seek approval because it already stands rooted. The kind that doesn't react because it observes. The kind that doesn't seduce because it radiates. That's who you're becoming. And that's why the world responds. Some will be drawn, some will be confused, some will be triggered. Let them be. Your mission is not to be understood, it's to be whole. And to be whole, you must guard what you've built. Because now you are more than a man. You are a container of fire, a conduit of will, a channel of conscious force in a world that celebrates chaos. And the moment you forget that, the moment you relax into your old habits, you'll feel it. The energy will drop, the field will dim, the clarity will fade. So protect it, refine it, reverence it, because the energy you hold now is no longer just yours, it's your offering to the world. There comes a moment in this path when you realize you are no longer chasing anything. Not validation, not women, not attention. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happens. The world begins to orbit around you, not because you asked for it, not because you crafted a perfect image, but because you became what Jung would call a living symbol, a man who has made contact with his inner center, his self, and now radiates a silent authority that others cannot name but feel. This is the birth of the magnetized man. He doesn't need to enter rooms with force. He doesn't need loud clothes, loud words, or loud energy. His power is quiet, and precisely for that reason, it's undeniable. Because in a world full of performance, silence is authenticity, and authenticity is magnetic. But this magnetism isn't just a gift, it's a weight. Because now you attract everything. You attract the feminine, not only in its nourishing form, but in its chaotic one. You attract business offers, some sincere, others filled with poison. You attract eyes, some in admiration, others in envy. You attract opportunity, and you attract traps, and the traps become more subtle the stronger you get. That's what no one tells you about power. The more of it you carry, the more the world tests how you use it. Will you flaunt it? Will you exploit it? Will you forget where it came from? This is why true retention requires inner humility, because without it, the ego will take over. And what once made you magnetic will now make you dangerous to yourself and others. Carl Jung warned that when the ego identifies with the self, it becomes inflated. It believes itself divine. It forgets its role as servant and tries to sit on the throne. This is the fall of many men on this path. They mistake the light flowing through them as their own creation, and in doing so, they cut themselves off from the very source they built. To avoid this, you must root deeper. Not just in practices, but in presence. Not just in rituals, but in awareness. Every moment becomes a meditation. Every interaction, a mirror. Every temptation, a riddle asking, are you still who you say you are? You walk through the world like a man carrying a lit torch. It lights the way for some, but it also invites the wind, and you must guard that flame, not with paranoia, but with purpose. The man who retains becomes rare, but the rare is often misunderstood. And misunderstood men must be strong enough to walk alone, not forever, but for long enough to become unshakable. That loneliness is sacred. It's not the absence of connection. It's the space where the soul grows its roots. You begin to feel things others don't. You sense shifts in energy, unspoken tension, hidden intentions, not as paranoia, but as clarity. You don't react, you read. You don't chase, you choose, because now your field speaks before your mouth does. And that field is not accidental. It was forged through nights of self-restraint, through mornings where you wanted to relapse but didn't, through hours of choosing stillness when distraction knocked. All of that effort became presence. Presence became gravity, and gravity pulls everything toward its center. But here's the twist. Just because they come to you doesn't mean they're meant for you. Many will approach, not because they see your soul, but because they feel your power. And they want it, to taste it, to own it, to break it, sometimes consciously, often unconsciously. This is the final layer of the test. Can you remain magnetic without attachment? Can you let the world orbit around you without needing to grab it? Most men fail here. They start giving their energy away again, not through waste, but through ego, trying to impress, to dominate, to be seen. But the magnetic man doesn't seek to be seen. He seeks to see clearly. Because the more clearly you see, the more sovereign you become. And sovereignty is the essence of this entire journey. Not sovereignty over others, not control, but the deep inner sovereignty that comes from not being moved by the world unless you choose to be. This is what separates the imitator from the initiator. The imitator learns the surface, the posture, the habits, the look. The initiator lives the truth, breath by breath, choice by choice, in silence, even when no one is watching. That's what makes him unstoppable, because he's no longer driven by what he wants. He's anchored in what he is, and what he is cannot be bought, seduced, or shaken. You are becoming that man, and as you do, you will notice something shift, not in the world, but in yourself. You will stop needing to be validated. You will stop explaining your decisions. You will stop defending your discipline. And in that stillness, you will begin to command reality. Because the world bends, not for the loud, but for the aligned. Once you've become magnetic, once you've built the gravity that draws people, events, and attention toward you, there's a question you can no longer ignore. Now that you have the power, what will you do with it? Because power without direction is dangerous, and energy without purpose is chaotic. Carl Jung believed that the self, the true center of the psyche, wasn't just about personal balance. It was about alignment with meaning, with the blueprint that lives inside you, the code that was always there, waiting for you to clear away distraction long enough to hear it. That's what retention really prepares you for. Not for attention, not for dominance, but for clarity of direction. You begin to feel it like a pull in your chest, a desire not to consume, but to create, not to be adored, but to build something timeless, not to escape life, but to shape it. And here's the paradox. The more energy you hold inside, the less you crave things, not because you're ascetic or numb, but because you realize you are already full. That fullness doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. You don't want more. You want what's aligned. You don't spread yourself thin, you focus, you sharpen, and in that sharpening you start to see that your life is not random. The people entering your space are not accidents. The emotions surfacing are not glitches. They are calls, signals, synchronistic events pointing you toward what Jung called individuation, the full realization of who you were born to become. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start asking, "What is trying to emerge through me?" That's the shift from ego to essence, from desire to destiny, from noise to signal. And you realize something else. Your sexual energy, the very force you've been holding, is not just biological. It's not even just psychological. It's spiritual. It's the fire of creation. It's what builds families, what starts revolutions, what writes symphonies, builds temples, and sculpts civilizations. You're not meant to suppress it. You're meant to steer it. That's the difference between retention and repression. Repression says, "I must shut this off." Retention says, "I must direct this higher." And when you direct it higher, your life begins to change on a cellular level. You speak with more depth. You listen with more presence. You move through the world with an invisible dignity. You no longer seek the feminine to complete you. You seek her when she reflects what is true, because you're no longer looking for someone to make you feel like a man. You are a man. You know it. You feel it in your spine, in your breath, in the way you walk into a room, and that presence speaks louder than words, louder than style, louder than effort. It is felt. But again, the world will not always celebrate this. Because the more you become aligned, the more you expose everything that is not. People will feel your peace and project their chaos. They'll feel your discipline and resent their own lack of it. They'll feel your clarity and try to blur it. You are not here to fix them. You are here to hold the standard. This is the responsibility of the retained man, to become the reminder that it's possible, that you can be full without addiction, grounded without pride, desiring without being consumed, open without being weak. You don't have to become a monk. You don't have to reject the world. But you do have to walk with intention, because your energy now carries weight. And that weight impacts every space you enter, every word you speak, every promise you make, every boundary you set. This is why Jung believed in the sacred task of individuation. Because once a man begins to integrate his parts, he naturally begins to affect the collective. You become the change. You don't need to scream, "I'm on retention." You don't need to prove anything. The woman who truly sees you will know. The business partner worth your time will feel it. The room you enter will shift, even if no one can explain why. Because when a man holds his essence and knows what to do with it, he becomes a channel for vision, for action, for legacy. He no longer wastes his life trying to be seen. He becomes the kind of man who leaves an echo. The kind of man who doesn't just pass through time, but bends it by the force of his attention, his integrity, his presence. This is not mythology. This is not hype. This is not a motivational fantasy. This is you, at your most dangerous, your most centered, your most alive. And it all began with a single choice: to stop leaking power, to stop chasing validation, to stop fearing stillness, and to face what was within. That's the moment the boy dies, and the man begins to rise. There comes a point when you stop asking others for answers. You stop needing proof that you're on the right path. You stop seeking external signs to validate your internal shift. Instead, you sit in the stillness. You feel the energy in your chest. You sense the quiet fire in your belly. You walk into the world, not asking for permission, but knowing that you were born for something greater. You begin to understand. This journey was never about retention in itself. It was about what it reveals. It revealed how easily you used to run, how quickly you handed yourself over. To pleasure, to distraction, to noise. How much of your life was spent escaping the weight of your own presence. And now, you carry it fully. That weight no longer crushes you. It grounds you. It reminds you that real strength doesn't explode. It contains. That real confidence doesn't demand. It rests. That real masculinity doesn't chase. It builds. Carl Jung taught that what you do not bring to consciousness will rule your life, and you will call it fate. And now you see it clearly. The patterns that once owned you are not your destiny. They were simply unconscious choices, repeated enough times to feel permanent. But nothing is permanent when a man becomes aware. You are no longer that boy seeking relief. You are no longer that man hungry for empty validation. You are not here to be liked. You are not here to fit in. You are not here to be understood. You are here to become whole, and wholeness isn't perfection, it's integration. It's holding your desire and not being ruled by it. It's feeling your anger and not becoming it. It's facing your fear and not flinching. It's seeing your shadow and still choosing the light. And sometimes, light means walking alone. Not because you're above anyone, but because you're no longer willing to abandon yourself to be accepted. You know now that your silence speaks louder than noise. Your presence is heavier than performance. Your gaze penetrates deeper than words ever could. Not because you're special, but because you stopped being scattered. You stopped breaking yourself into pieces just to be digestible to a world addicted to comfort. And in that act, you became rare. But being rare comes with a cost. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be mocked. You'll be tested relentlessly. People will try to pull you back into who you used to be, not because they hate you, but because your transformation threatens everything they still haven't faced in themselves. And so you must be ready, not to fight them, but to stand still, not to react, but to remain rooted, not to explain, but to embody. Because in the end, that's all that matters. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when temptation calls your name? Who are you when life strips you bare and asks, did you become the man you were meant to be? No title can answer that. No technique can answer that. Only the way you walk, only the way you breathe, only the way you hold your own soul in the quiet, unseen moments of your life. That's where your truth is. That's where your legacy begins. That's where your kingdom is built. So if the world feels heavy now, if your urges are louder than ever, if your path feels lonely, remember, you are not being punished. You are being refined. You are being forged in a silence louder than applause, in a fire hotter than lust, in a purpose deeper than words. You are not falling behind. You are falling inward. And inward is where everything changes. So take one more breath. Plant your feet. Raise your chin. Because the war is not out there. It never was. The war is within, and you were born to win it.